All right, and we are live. All right, so I have an impromptu live. I have John Martinez with me today, everybody, and I have reached out to him this morning. Actually, he posted a video this morning about rock star salespeople and the mistakes that people are making, and the video kind of hit home because in my business, I just want to give a little background story here. In my business, one of the struggles, one of the things, the missions that I've been on the last couple of years are trying to identify like what exactly made a rock star salesperson for an organization. And I went down 1,000 rabbit holes, John. I'm telling you, with like DISC and OMG and the culture index, and trying to figure out like, is there a perfect personality profile? And I actually found one that is a great salesperson, does really, really good, but they usually only last like 9 months to a year, and then they burn out or try to steal from you. It's really weird. So, and realizing more and more that there isn't necessarily a rock star out there, and also that my gut was more important in telling me who was going to be good in my organization than some of these personality tests. So your video hit home. Okay. And I'm sure it hit home for a lot of people. So we're jumping on today. We're doing this live, and I want to talk about that. So talk about that video in context. Like tell the audience a little more about that video and what your thoughts were behind it.
Yeah. So, I'm obviously in a lot of REI groups online and offline. And one of the major topics that's always coming up is, where do I find this salesperson that's just going to close the leads? And like you said, there's I like some of the assessments. You could get closer to finding maybe someone who would work, but it's just this never-ending parade or revolving door of different solutions, and none ever really works like you want it to, right? You just don't find this person that you just hand them leads and they close forever, and it's like, that's done. I no longer have to worry about acquisitions. So what the video was about was, instead of focusing on the person, it's much easier to focus on what's my sales process. And then when it comes to hiring that person, think about who's going to work the sales process the best. And I gave the example of McDonald's, right? You never see a job ad for McDonald's like, hey, we're looking for a rock star fryer or burger cook, Mm-hmm. It's like, they don't need it. They just want someone that can follow the McDonald's directions, show up to work on time, and do what they're told to do. So I think when it comes to salespeople, you need to kind of start changing your thinking and think in terms of process, and then who fits that process.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the questions, like I want to kind of dig into this a little bit because, like I said, I went down this rabbit hole of trying to find the perfect personality profile and that person that was just going to be a machine at closing. And I've had a few in my organization. Burnout always seems to be, if I get somebody that's considered a superstar, they don't seem to last. It's like the tortoise and the hare, right? If I get somebody that's just tried and true and steady, they seem to stick for a long time. If I get somebody that's a superstar for whatever reason, they don't last. And, but I always have this internal struggle. I did acquisitions myself when I started, years ago, and I still jump in and do it every once in a while just to prove that I still can. I have developed this instinct through the years. Like I can read body language, I can read tone inflection. I can dig into, like, my instinct, my gut will tell me like I got to go deeper on some of these questions and pull back the layers. Yeah. That's always something I'm trying to find in my salesperson, that instinct, that desire to dig a little deeper, to go a little further. Like, are you saying don't look for that? Or are you saying that that's not necessary? Like, let's dig into that a little bit more. Am I looking at that wrong? Or is that something that we can teach? Because I always wonder, is that teachable, or is that like a natural, you got it or you don't? Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. So, I mean, what you're really referring to is that digging in deep and when to pull back and all that stuff you've kind of learned to do naturally.
Right.
That's part of a good sales process, right? So, if you can find someone who does that naturally, that's great. But really, you want to be able to find someone who does that comfortably. So, for example, let's say you are looking for someone, I don't know, who would pull back, right? Who would know when to take the pressure off, release that pressure valve and keep the conversation going. That's what you'd want to do in an interview, is ask them about a situation like that. Like, hey, have you ever had a prospect get upset with you? Well, how did you handle it? And you're looking for that person who would say, well, I let my foot off the gas, even if it's natural or not natural. The other thing you can do is just kind of role play with them, tell them what you want to do and see if they pick it up, right? Say, hey, I'm going to role play with you. Here's what I want to do. In the situation when I'm buying houses, if someone comes at me with this, here's how we want to respond and here's why. Let's role play to see if you can do that. So really, it's both, Don. is it can they do that naturally? And if they can't do it naturally, can they just follow the directions and force themselves to do it, and be pretty good at it that way? Does that make sense?
It does. Let me ask you,
Yeah.
the question on the level, like a good sales process, which I think I already know the answer because I'm seeing it in my organization, but a good sales process, you feel like that'll trump that too. If somebody doesn't have that natural instinct, but you put the guidelines in place, that should trump that as well. That can make somebody that doesn't necessarily have that natural instinct at least act within those parameters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like, think of a good sales process as like bumper bowling, right? If you have a good sales process, it doesn't matter how terrible the bowler is, they're going to get the ball all the way down the lane and always knock over at least some pins. Sometimes they might get lucky, right? So that's the way I think of a sales process. It's like, it's those bumpers on the side of the bowling alley where it just keeps people kind of in track and makes up for some of their deficiencies.
What do you think some of the biggest mistakes are that businesses like ours make when it comes to developing a good sales process? Like what are we usually overlooking? Like if you could identify from some of the companies you've looked at, like what are we usually overlooking? What steps are we skipping? Like where's the
Yeah.
break?
Yeah. So a great question. I think most people have this vision in their head of what a great salesperson is. And it's like the silver tongued, talk to
Mhm.
anyone, friends with everybody type of person. And I think that I'm not saying those can't be great salespeople, but I think you want to look for the opposite. Think of it this way. If you look for introverts, what do you have? You have people who don't want to talk. What does that mean they're going to do on a sales call? Well, they're going to find every way not to talk possible. Well, what does that mean? They're going to ask questions and keep their prospect talking. If you just made that little shift, forget any other parts of sales process, you're going to end up with better results because there's going to be more rapport. They're going to uncover more reasons why someone would and wouldn't do business with you. And it's just going to generally be a better sales conversation. So I'd say the biggest mistake is looking for those really outgoing, energetic, I talk to anybody salespeople. The best salespeople I've had work under me personally, usually the introverted people, because they're naturally inclined to ask more and talk less.
And that I will say that I wholeheartedly agree with. I consider you a really good friend, and we're as good of friends as two introverts could possibly be, because we are both introverts. I'm probably a little more out of my shell at this point in life because I forced myself that way, but I am a natural introvert, and that's the one thing I like to do is ask questions and shut my mouth and listen. I don't want to talk a lot, and I want to get to the solving of that issue as quick as possible. So I do feel like introverts do sell better. Personally, I don't know if I'm biased or not, but I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, the data bears it out. There's been some studies on what makes a great salesperson and ranking them and things like that. And those extroverted characteristics, when you look at like, okay, here's the group of the best salespeople on the earth. Those extroverts make up, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was somewhere between 5 and 10% of the best salespeople on earth are actually really extroverted. So the data bears it out. You want more of an introvert typically with a complex sale like an REI.
So, okay. And I mentioned, I agree. So that's probably one of the mistakes that people are making is they're looking for somebody that is going to dominate a conversation where they really should look for somebody that wants to talk less and ask more questions. What else? I mean, because I mean, like I'm on the hunt right now. I'm actually rebuilding my sales team. I think that's the other reason why it kind of hit home. And like I have a girl in here did two of them actually. They're really surprising me. They're not necessarily introverts, but they're definitely not extroverts.
Right.
They were both gut instinct hires. They're following our sales process, which I can see that unfold, like you mentioned. They're more of the tortoise than the hare,
Mhm.
and I can see their commitment long term. So, what other mistakes do you feel like companies are making? When they're hiring?
So, I saw another thing yesterday that I posted about. I'm trying to post more about stuff I see and just point it out.
Right.
There's this statistic. If you're on LinkedIn, it's like it's everywhere. Always been there for years. Where it's like 1% of salespeople follow up one time, or whatever it is. 5% follow up 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and most sales are made in the 5th or 6th follow up. Something along those lines. And I think there's this culture of relying in some companies of relying too much on the follow up. Believing that the power's in the follow-up. Now, don't get me wrong. Follow-up's amazing. You need to follow up with everyone, and lots of sales happen with follow-up. But what I see happening, another big mistake that I don't think anyone's really pointed out or is talking about, is too much reliance on follow-up. Typically, what happens in follow-up, When you get deals, there's two ways to get deals and follow up. One, the situation changes, right?
Mhm.
Something has changed and now the motivation is increased. It's time to make a move. But the other time you get deals and follow up, it's just because you finally had those pieces of the sales conversation you didn't initially have. So I think there's a lot of companies out there relying too much on follow-up and really just extending their sales conversations into 3, 4, 5, 6 conversations instead of getting it done in the first chunk, because they just have this belief that it should be done in the follow-up. So that's the next biggest thing I see is less one-call closes, too much reliance on the follow-up. I don't think there needs to be. I think a lot of people are breaking their sales appointments into 2, 3, 4 appointments when a portion, not all, but a portion of those probably could have been closed on the first call if they just checked all the boxes.
Yeah, and I think that's, as an industry, I guess influencer, I hate to say that word about myself. I always say follow up is one of the most important marketing channels I have. Follow up in my business is probably 80% of my business, but we don't always frame it like you put it. The reason why follow up is so important in my business is because the situation's either changed on the seller side or on our side. For instance, we're buying a lot of stuff right now because the market's on fire. We're buying a lot of stuff right now where the comp has changed. And something that didn't work a year ago, suddenly now the seller never budgeted in their price, but the comp has changed and now we can buy it. And go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a great point. If you're looking, if you're a business owner, you're looking at your follow-ups and you realize that 80, 90% of your follow-ups, nothing changed on your side or theirs, that's a good sign that probably should have been closed earlier and less amount of sales calls, right? So if you're closing on follow-up because something changed, kudos, that's what you should be doing. If you're doing it just because you finally had that conversation you've been waiting to have, you could have had it earlier.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So back to the hiring aspect, the looking for the rock star. Give me if you were hiring an acquisitions person right now today, what are maybe a couple of good questions that we should be asking somebody that identifies whether or not there's somebody that's going to be able to follow a good sales process and I think be a good fit for an organization like we run in the real estate side of things?
Yeah, one great question to ask is tell me about a time in sales where you failed, lost a deal you thought you were going to get, and what happened. And what you're looking for when you ask that question is you're looking for the ability to grow and to adopt a sales process. If someone says, I had this chance for a great deal and my boss did this, or the company wasn't flexible and they forced me into this hole, or the competition cut price and stole it. If they do anything, if they blame anyone other than themselves, then there's not a lot you can do with that person. It just means every time they lose, their mind is going to go, I'm going to blame the market, the environment, my company, the product. You're looking for people who, when they lost, they go, you know what, when I looked at it, I really could have done this better. I should have asked these questions. I should have better prepared. When you get that type of real answer, you go, bang, this person can adopt a sales process. This person is open to learning. This person is open to coaching. So I think that's a really great question to start to gauge on whether people blame themselves when they don't make it, or if they blame outside forces.
That's actually a fantastic question to ask for any position. That's how we hire our contractors. We're looking for somebody that answers the same way. If we have an issue, I like to see something they finish, not because I want to tell them how beautiful it is, but I want to point out that one thing that's wrong and then see how they handle themselves. So are they blaming their employee or the homeowner, or are they taking responsibility? So that's fantastic advice. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, 100%. How important do you feel sales experience is to somebody that you're hiring? Because that same question can be asked in a multitude. Where did something go wrong? Where'd you fail on a task? You can always gauge somebody's coachability that way. So how important do you feel actual sales experience is? Do we put too much emphasis on somebody having sales experience, when we're hiring?
Yeah, great question, because there's a couple ways to look at it. When you look at sales experience, you only want to use that as a gauge if it's the same experience, right? So in REI, were they an acquisitions agent somewhere else and did great? Okay, that translates to your business, right? It's pretty safe bet if you can verify that success, that they'll have that same success with you. But if it's any other type of sales, like a business to business, long sales cycle type of sales, that doesn't necessarily translate. Sometimes it doesn't translate at all. You could be really good at sales in one industry and not so good in another. So only if it's a lateral move in sales can you kind of use that to gauge. But what I've seen, bigger picture with my clients at least, I keep hearing these stories about, you wouldn't believe it, we have this and just fill in the blank, just anything outside of sales. Like the guy was laying bricks for us, really polished though, thought he'd do good, and he's killing it in sales, right? So I'm seeing more people successful that came into real estate companies from outside of sales right now. And this is just, I don't have any stats. It's just, kind of the messages I get and what people tell me about who on their team is actually succeeding. I'm seeing more that came in outside from sales that just adopted the sales process than someone who's a salesperson somewhere else that came in.
Yeah, and I'm learning that, I think I put too much emphasis on sales experience for a little bit. I've had some really good employees that have come from sales backgrounds. I would say my two top right now. One came from the dental field, and it was actually way back when I gave her a culture index, and I was like, "You fit what I say I'm looking for, but I don't know." And we went back and forth. I've known her for a little bit now, and finally, I was like, I think you'll be good at sales. My gut tells me you'll be. I brought her in, and she's just killing it. But one of the traits that she has, I think, is important to look for in somebody, is that Monday morning quarterback. She instinctually will Monday morning quarterback herself, and she will when she gets off a call, she'll go back and listen to the recordings. And she does that on her own without being, prompted. And I remember one time she's like, I went through this and I could have said this differently. And I could have dug in deeper here, and I should have listened longer here. And I'm like, dang, all right. that is what I need.
The first one of our students that I heard that actually was doing that was Greg Helbeck. And he does a lot of we do a little bit of one-on-one coaching now with just him, but he's the guy. He is same thing. He excelled so quickly because he had that same attitude, and you just dig in and go, let me listen to that. Oh, that was terrible. That was good. Let's do more of that, less of this. That's unique. That is not very common at all.
It's not, but I want to encourage people, like if you have somebody that is, and I think that's pretty obvious to most of us as leaders, but I want to state the obvious. You have somebody that's willing to dig into their own recordings without being prompted, or have a conversation with you about a conversation they had with the seller, and they have some questions about, or need some feedback about the conversation and how they handled things. That is a unique skill set. That's what I did when I was door knocking, when I first started in acquisitions way back when, 17 years ago. I had to say that out loud. I would get in the car and I'd run through the whole conversation through my head, and I would just break it down. What could I have said differently here? What could I have done differently there? Should I listen longer here? Should I ask another question there? Did I go in too soon? And I would do that over and over and over again for every conversation. And I think that's one of the reasons why, for me, some of the things I do now are more instinctual. And that is a skill set that you have in your organization. Like, you need to take that person and put them under your wing, and they're going to go a long way. Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah. So very cool. Well, I got all my questions, I think, asked about this. I really like that kind of, I've been kicking around myself about getting on and doing lives when they're just top of mind. And I think that you're on to something there, John, for sure. I know that one stuck with me, and I'm sure it stuck with a bunch of people. So you got anything going on that people need to know about, need to hear about, that they should be registering for, being a part of? Because I know you do some killer sales training stuff. So I want to make sure people have
sales stuff. We got a YouTube channel, REI Sales Academy. MidwestRev.com is our website. We got tons of free trainings and videos and scripts and all that. I always recommend people start there. And then if they want more help, we have an online academy, and we're doing a boot camp in January in Dallas as well.
Okay. And I know I have my team members, that are either seasoned or new, go through John's stuff on a regular basis. I've paid for a handful of my team to go to your events before, and it's always good stuff, John. I really appreciate our conversations, man. I thank you just for taking the time to talk with me.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right.